Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Astrox Radio. This is a podcast from the Astrox YouTube channel. So, we have two headline topics for today. The New Glenn rocket from Blue Origin is getting a new engines and a new variant. So, it's going to have this new engine cell, and it's going to have this new variant of 9x4. More about that later. The second headline topic is a Shenzhou-22 empty crew capsule has launched and is on its way to the Tiangong space station. Also, more about that later. So, we are here for Astrox Radio, and we should just get right into it. So, let's just first cover what's going to be in this episode. This episode will be less content heavy than other episodes, but each part of the content will be explored more in depth, if you know what I mean. So the headline topic, obviously, well, one of them, the New Glenn variant. And then we'll have some space news summarized from various sites, like space.com and way more. I'll have some upcoming shorts I'll be talking about. How the Starship had blown up, not really blown up, but had like a puncture in its tank. Then in section 2, or just before section 1 ends, I might start the next headline topic, but then we'll continue it in section 2. We'll have more space news summarized, an Astrolix C devlog, and more PicoCalc stuff. And finally, we'll have subreddit stuff with an outro. Oh my god, we've already spent so much time. Let's just go right into it. New Glenn is a rocket from Blue Origin. Okay, New Glenn is a rocket from Blue Origin, yeah. And they recently revealed an ambitious New Glenn upgrade aiming for super heavy lift power. So the New Glenn rocket is a major competitor to SpaceX's Starship. It's had 2 successful test flights so far. First one was maybe a partial success, but it was its very first flight. And on the second one, it was a complete success. They landed the booster on their barge at sea, and they had sent 2 satellites called Escapade to Mars. Blue Origin has outlined bold plans for a much larger version of its New Glenn launcher, signaling the company's intent to push deeper into super heavy lift market. The new variant, called New Glenn 9x4, adds extra engines to both stages and is being positioned as a major leap beyond the rocket that flew its second mission earlier this month. The company described the upgrade as, quoted, a new super heavy class rocket, marking the most substantial design shift since New Glenn's development began more than a decade ago. CEO Dave Limp later shared digital renderings showing the enlarged booster towering above even NASA's Saturn V. Saturn V is the rocket that was used in the Apollo program and to send the Skylab space station into orbit. And that was a huge technological advancement at the time, and still was for maybe 20 to 30 years, maybe 20 years after that. And now, this new variant will be even taller than the Saturn V. So, what does the 9x4 upgrade really mean? Blue Origin has intended the new configuration to be with the 7x2 version rather than to replace it. So, if they want to have a bit more of a smaller payload or something, or like something that's not going all the way to Mars, they would just use a 7x2 for like low Earth orbit payloads. But then when they want a bigger one, they could take the 9x4. So by expanding the numbers of BE4 engines on the first stage from 7 to 9 and doubling the BE3U engines on the upper stage from 2 to 4, the rocket expected to carry far heavier payloads. According to the company, the 9x4 variant will carry over 70 metric tons to low Earth orbit, quoted, and will also deliver, quoted, over 20 metric tons to trans-lunar injection, quoted. The larger model will introduce an 8.7 meter fairing, creating more room for bulky spacecraft such as parts of mega constellations or deep space hardware. A spokesperson said, "We aren't disclosing a specific time frame today. The iterative design for our current 7x2 vehicle means we can quickly build this rocket." There is a lot of growing pressure in the launch market, especially from SpaceX. That's why Blue Origin is accelerating its efforts at a time when competitors around the globe are racing to scale up their own rockets. New heavy lift concepts are underway at companies such as SpaceX, United Launch Alliance, and Rocket Lab as demand rises for larger batches of satellite and long distance missions. This is a cultural shift under Dave Limp. Blue Origin's renewed momentum reflects broader changes inside the organization. Since taking over as chief executive nearly 2 years ago, Limp has focused on faster execution and expanding manufacturing capacity. The pace of announcements has noticeably increased, including this week's reveal of a full-scale deployable aerobrake for Mars and lunar missions. Limp said, quoted, "The key cultural shift that we're trying to achieve is to move from an R&D company, which is research and development, to a manufacturing and operational system company. Space company, I mean. The recent successful launch and landing of New Glenn suggests the company is beginning to hit that stride, just as it prepares to build something significantly larger. I'm telling you, New Glenn is going to be a major, like I've already said this lots of times, but a major competitor to Starship. Now I guess we can move on to some space news summarized from various websites. We'll be starting with space.com. So on 27th November, NASA astronaut Chris Williams and 2 cosmonauts launch on mission to ISS aboard Soyuz MS-28. NASA astronaut Chris Williams and Roscosmos cosmonauts Sergei Kudryashov and Sergei Mykolaiv, both its separate spellings for the first time just saying, launch aboard the Russian-built Soyuz MS-28 spacecraft on a mission bound for the International Space Station. On Wednesday, November 26th, SpaceX scrubs launch of 140 satellites atop used Falcon 9 rocket from California coast. SpaceX's Transporter 15 launch is now slated to launch no earlier than Friday, November 28th. So when this podcast is out, which is Sunday, it may have already launched unless it's delayed again. The massive fleet of tiny satellites, because is stuck on Earth for a few more days after SpaceX called off an attempt to launch them into orbit on Wednesday, November 26th. This is saying a massive fleet of tiny satellites because on a rideshare mission, which is Transporter 15, there is many satellites that are all from different companies, all in the same rocket. These are all so that it's a cheaper launch cost, as SpaceX doesn't have to have special separate launches for just like one company. So like 20 companies together can have a launch. So SpaceX scrubbed the planned launch of 140 satellites. So yeah, a lot of satellites. All aboard the same Falcon 9 rocket, so it's a rideshare mission. Just over 15 minutes before the planned liftoff from a seaside pad at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. The company did not disclose the reason for the delay. The next opportunity to launch a mission, called Transporter 15, will be Friday, November 18th at 1:19 p.m. EST, which is 6:19 GMT. There are 2 main launch providers, ExoLaunch and SEOPS, SEOPS. Each have a collection of different spacecraft aboard the Transporter 15 for various clients. VADA, a company that launches experiments that can return to Earth on re-entry capsules, will fly its 5th spacecraft, called W5, on the mission. And there are dozens of other satellites representing companies from around the world, including Taiwan and even Italy. The Falcon 9 rocket on Transporter 15 includes a first stage that has flown 29 times before. If all goes well, the first stage will return to Earth after liftoff to land on SpaceX's drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You, in the Pacific Ocean so it can be returned to shore for eventual reuse. Not much else has happened other than those 2 main stories, but there's been northern lights visible across the United States and lots of solar storms happening recently. Other than that, not much recently. So now we can talk about some upcoming shorts on my YouTube channel. So after this podcast releases, I'll have a whole short about how solid rocket boosters work. Those boosters on the side of mega rockets, such as SLS, and what other rockets are there? Hard to think from the top of my mind. They're known as SRBs. They jettison after their use and they're never reused again because they're solid rocket boosters, so you can't refill them easily. After that, we'll have a short which is on what causes rockets to explode. And then we'll have a show about what is dark matter. Many people don't know what it is, and this will be quite a deep dive into what it is, because there's been so many misconceptions online, which are not brainwashing people, but like giving them the wrong idea. Then we will have the Astrox Radio episode 8. After we'll have why NASA uses Linux. I use Linux too, if you're wondering. I use Antix Linux, which is a really lightweight Linux distro, which I'm using on a HP EliteBook 850G3 laptop. And NASA uses Linux too, which is interesting. And I'll have a debunking space myths about the moon landing was not faked. I still can't believe so many people think the glorious Apollo moon landings were faked. Like, you don't even have that much proof and you're thinking it's faked. It just doesn't make sense. The first next generation Starship booster has been damaged in testing. The first booster in the new generation of Starship vehicles suffered significant damage during November 21st test, adding to doubts about the vehicle's development schedule. The Super Heavy booster, designated Booster 18, was at test site near SpaceX's Starbase, Texas. Facilitates in the early morning when the lower section of the booster appeared to burst, according to independent video. The booster remained standing, but images taken later showed part of the structure had ruptured. Unlike a June incident at the same test site, when the Starship upper stage exploded during preparations for a static fire test, no propellant had been loaded and no engines were installed. The booster was undergoing tests to confirm it could handle pressures and loads. The company provided no additional details, other than noting no personnel were injured. Booster 18 is the first Super Heavy built for version 3 of Starship. Changes from version 2 include an upgraded fuel transfer line, similar in size to a Falcon 9 booster, an integrated hot staging ring that remains attached to the top of the booster, the use of 3 instead of 4 grid fins for re-entry, and the upgraded Raptor engines, from Raptor 2 to Raptor 3. Those upgrades, alongside improvements to Starship's upper stage, are essential to SpaceX's plan to bring the vehicle into service for launching larger Starlink satellites and supporting NASA's Artemis lunar lander program. Before the anomaly, the company was optimistic it would begin launching version 3 soon. Multiple Starship V3 vehicles were in production, he said then, when a booster heading to the pad, quoted, in days to weeks, quoted, for testing. He said, I'm very hopeful we're going to be able to fly early next year, maybe as early as January. The incident could increase pressure on NASA to revise its Artemis lunar landing plans. SpaceX is under contract to provide a Starship-based lunar lander for Artemis 3, officially scheduled for 2027. Even before this setback, it was clear the company was significantly behind schedule, potentially by years. Okay, so now we're done with section 1, and I hope you're going to stick around for section 2. So if you're still here listening, thank you. Before we continue on to section 2, because Astrox Radio is completely free of charge to you, can you support us by subscribing to the Astrox YouTube channel? And also, if you're listening on another platform, to follow the podcast. I really appreciate your support. And now, let's continue on to section 2. Okay, welcome back. I guess we can go straight back into our headline topic. Well, the second one. The Shenzhou-22 empty spacecraft has launched. The Shenzhou-22 mission, which was originally scheduled to fly next year, had launched successfully on Tuesday, 25th November, from Site 901 at the Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center in China's Inner Mongolia province. Shenzhou-22, mounted atop a Chang'e 2F rocket, launched without crew and safely docked autonomously with the Tiangong space station after a 3.5-hour orbital flight and a rendezvous procedure. Shenzhou-22 launched in a sudden easterly direction to insert the 8,100 kilogram spacecraft into an orbit inclined 41.47 degrees to the equator, which matches Tiangong's orbital inclination. The spacecraft, loaded with food and other supplies, in place of crew, also maneuvered to match Tiangong's 386 by 391 km orbit before docking to one of the Tiangong's two ports for Shenzhou spacecraft at 7:50 UTC. The China Manned Space Agency (CMSA) launched Shenzhou-22 to provide Tiangong's current crew with a safe spacecraft to ride home following on-orbit damage to the Shenzhou-20 spacecraft. This damage, presumably, was discovered in the days or weeks immediately before the Shenzhou-20 astronauts Chen Dong, Chen Zuri, and Wang Ji were supposed to return home. The current crew members aboard Tiangong, which is Zhang Lu, Wu Fei, and Zhang Hozhang, launched to Tiangong aboard Shenzhou-21 on October 31st. Until Shenzhou-22 docked, they only had compromised Shenzhou-20 spacecraft available to them if an emergency were to force an evacuation of the station after Shenzhou-20's crew returned to Earth aboard the Shenzhou-21 spacecraft on November 14th and the landing site in Inner Mongolia. The Shenzhou-20 crew and spacecraft were supposed to return to China on November 5th, but CMSA elected to delay the return due to damage to a window on the spacecraft descent module, likely caused by a space debris impact. Damage was visible on the outer pane. The inner panes were not rated to withstand direct exposure to the plasma and heating of re-entry, so they didn't take it. Tiangong, in its current state, typically supports a crew of 3, but the station had to support 6 crew members for an additional 9 days. The Shenzhou-20 crew needed to return home due to Tiangong's supply situation, so using Shenzhou-21 to return them was the most obvious near-term solution. The Shenzhou-20 crew spent a Chinese record of 204 days in space before landing back in China aboard the Shenzhou-21 descent module. This preparation was in line with the CMSA's long-standing policy to prepare the spacecraft and rocket for the next Shenzhou mission, as well as the Shenzhou mission scheduled to fly at that time. The Shenzhou-22 mission would be the first launch on-need flight in Chinese human spaceflight history. After Shenzhou-22 docks with Tiangong, the next scheduled Shenzhou launch will be likely Shenzhou-23 in the spring of 2026. China is also planning for one of its astronauts to spend about a year in space and send a Pakistani astronaut to Tiangong for a short stay. CMSA is also preparing for an uncrewed orbital flight of Shenzhou's replacement, the Mengzhu spacecraft, next year. This is actually really cool, as this is going to be China's first hands-on opportunity with these kind of space high-stakes situations. Not very high stakes, but still quite high stakes, as it risks the survival of 6 astronauts because of the supply situation. Now let's do some space news summarized from various sites like space.com. Thanksgiving dinner on the International Space Station will be out of this world for astronauts. If all goes to plan, a new Soyuz astronaut crew will join the ISS in time for Thanksgiving dinner. NASA astronauts on the International Space Station are planning to have Thanksgiving dinner with some newly arrived guests, just like many people in the United States. In a new video, members of the Expedition 73 crew shared their plans for Thanksgiving, which likely includes a special arrival at the International Space Station. NASA astronaut Chris Williams and Sergei Kudryashov and Sergei Milkirov of the Russian space agency Roscosmos will launch on Thanksgiving Day, November 26th, on the Soyuz MS-28 mission and arrive in time for dinner if all goes to plan. So this has already launched, I'm just saying. The 4-time NASA space flyer Mike Finnick, celebrating his second US Thanksgiving in space after ISS Expedition 18, which ran from October 2008 to April 2009, said in a video that the ISS crew is already getting food ready for the new arrivals. He showed off turkey and cranberry sauce in front of the camera, facing the crew in a crowded Destiny module, where US research primarily takes place. Aside from the food, Korean-American NASA astronaut Johnny Kim, also on his first mission, has said that he was looking forward to Thanksgiving as a moment to, quoted, to kind of pause and slow down and reflect on our lives, the people we cherish in our lives, and all the support we've had on this journey. Expedition 73 had begun in April and is anticipated to complete wrap up later this year. NASA has not shared when the US Japanese crew will return, which is a crew before this one that's just about to go up, but it will be sometime after the new arrivals on Soyuz settle into their duties on the orbiting complex. Massive computer simulation creates a hyper-realistic model of the Milky Way. Researchers at the RIKEN Center for Interdisciplinary Theoretical and Mathematical Scientists in Japan recently accomplished something truly unprecedented. With the help of colleagues from the University of Tokyo and the University of Barcelona, the team conducted the world's first Milky Way simulations that accurately represent more than 100 billion stars over 10,000 years. The simulation not only represented 100 times more individual stars than previous models, but was also produced 100 times faster. The simulation was accomplished by combining 7 million CPU cores. Just saying, your normal computers, or let's say your phones, usually have about 6 to maybe 16 cores. This has 7 million cores for the CPU, machine learning algorithms, and numerical simulations. The resulting model represents a breakthrough for astrophysics, supercomputing, and AI development, and provides astronomers with a means for studying stellar and galactic evolution on a massive scale. The team's research was presented in a paper titled "The First Star-by-Star N-Body Hydrodynamics Simulation of Our Galaxy, Coupling with a Surrogate Model" was the name of the published paper. Simulations of the Milky Way that capture dynamics down to individual stars are a means of testing theories of galactic formation, structure, and evolution, which they can then compare to astronomical observations. Astronomers have been working for decades to develop simulations of increasingly complexity, which is rather challenging, to accurately capture all the forces at work. These include gravity, fluid dynamics, supernovae, element synthesis, and the influence of supermassive black holes, all of which occur on different scales. At the rate we are doing right now, 1 billion years of galactic history could be simulated in just 115 days. These results provide astronomers with an invaluable tool for testing theories about galactic evolution and how our universe came to be. It also demonstrates how the inclusion of surrogate AI models could improve advanced simulations by reducing the time and amount of energy required. Beyond this, astrophysics, this AI shortcut approach could enable other complex simulations that call for large and small scale factors, such as meteorology, ocean dynamics, and climate science. Truly outstanding. NASA renews commitment to Europe's life-hunting Mars rover despite Trump budget cuts. These confirmations have been given to us in writing, so this is a very important step. NASA will help Europe get its long-delayed Mars life-hunting ExoMars rover off the ground, even though President Donald Trump's proposed NASA budget cuts the collaboration in a drive to reduce spending on science. The announcement was made at the European Space Agency's Ministerial Council, a high-level meeting of the agency's 23 member states, on Wednesday, November 25th. Quoted, I got yesterday a letter from the NASA administration to confirm the contributions of NASA to Rosalind Franklin. ESA Director General Joseph Asabecher told reporters at the opening of the meeting. The ExoMars Rosalind Franklin rover is a 660-pound, which is 300 kilograms, Mars exploration robot fitted with a 6.6 foot, which is 2 meters, drill to search for signs of life below the red planet's radiation-battered surface. The project was conceived in the early 2000s, and has faced multiple setbacks on its way to launchpad. And the mission was originally planned in cooperation with NASA, but the American agency withdrew in 2012 after budget cuts imposed by the Obama administration, forcing ESA to seek support from Russia. But finally, it's back. Now let's do and Ashlexi devlog and PicoCalc stuff. So I've decided, I was talking a lot about how I was going to do TUI for Ashlexi. TUI, text user interface, which is basically like in between GUI and CLI, which is command line interface and graphical user interface. But now I've decided to switch back to CLI to make my life easier and to make it more tech enthusiast focused. So a CLI is command line interface. Everything's done through the command line. You open apps, you run apps, you do command, you check your battery through you do everything through the command line. Like everything. I can't reiterate this enough. So I might be thinking that through the C interpreter for app running and plugins, you could maybe run UI apps using the interpreter, like compiler and linker thing. And that would be cool, as you can run UI apps, but I would prefer CLI apps. But for like things like text editors and maybe a web browser, it could be basic UI, or a web browser could still be CLI to have the retro hacking, how do I say this? Hacking vibe. Yeah. So yeah, CLI for apps is good, but I might give an option for people to have UI. And I'm still thinking about the plugins thing. But it's probably gonna still be a plugins thing, as it will be easier for people, instead of building the whole operating system from GitHub. They can do it right on their PicoCalc and add plugins into the operating system to improve their own experience. I've recently received my microSD card, which I bought from Amazon, and I'm going to load on Ubuntu or Calcu Linux onto it until Ashlexi OS is done, and I'm going to use that and code on my PicoCalc. And it's recently arrived, but I'm this weekend gonna work on it. So by the time this podcast is out, I might have already got it running. And I'm probably gonna make a Reddit post if I've got it running. Other than that, not much has happened. Subreddit stuff. My subreddit. Just, I said Reddit post. r/Astroxia _SRT, which is my subreddit. So ASTROXIA _ capital S capital R capital T is my subreddit. The SRT stands for Space, Rockets and Tech, and the subreddit is focused on space, rockets and tech, obviously, and also everything Astrox. So you can have a bit of chess mixed in there and everything else. So I would really hope you guys join that subreddit, but not much has happened on that subreddit. There's been 12 members total, and most of the almost all the posts are from just me, and there's been one post from someone that's not just me, which I'm quite excited, as it's not just me making the post on the subreddit, which is quite good. And also, soon my channel is to be hitting 500 subscribers. By the time you're listening to this podcast, it's probably already at 500. Hopefully, please subscribe. And I'm gonna release a 500 subscriber special digital poster, which I've designed. It's not very special, but it's not very hard. It doesn't look like I worked very hard on it, but I spent so much time on it. And as I've hit 500 subs, I'll be giving this poster out for free as a digital copy on my GitHub. And I'll remind you in my next short if it's out by then, if I hit 500 subs. So thank you all for getting me to 500 subs, and I would love to release this poster. So I guess I can now sum up this podcast episode. So we've done a New Glenn variant headline topic. We've done some space news summarize, talked about my upcoming shorts, had a shallow / deep dive into Starship kind of blowing up, our second headline topic of Shenzhou-22's empty spacecraft docking with the Tiangong space station, some space news summarized, an Ashlexi devlog and a bit of PicoCalc stuff with my microSD card, and finally subreddit stuff of my r/Astroxia _SRT and the poster that's about to release. So thanks a lot for listening to this episode of Astrox Radio, episode 7, and follow this podcast anywhere you're watching, and subscribe to Astrox on YouTube. Enjoy!